Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be with you here today at the United Nations as we look ahead at International Women's Day during the 67th Commission on the Status of Women. Here to discuss the reality of the Women, Peace and Security agenda are members of Karama, a network of women's rights activists and organizations in 13 countries in Africa and the Arab region. We are very grateful to have the opportunity to address the media today. And for that, we thank the permanent representative of Ireland and his staff at the Irish Mission. We hear a lot of talk about the importance of women's participation, especially during CSW. But Ireland has always stood ready to take action and ensure that women's civil society has a platform here at the United Nations. We are extremely thankful for their support. Participation is, of course, one of the pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, alongside prevention, protection, relief, and recovery. The proper implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda is one of the top means that Karama has identified towards our goals of ending violence against women and girls and ensuring that women are able to participate fully in the decision-making process. Today, we will hear from truly outstanding activists from Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Palestine, and Sudan about the reality of the Women, Peace and Security agenda in Africa and the Arab region. My name is Reem Abbas. I'm moderating on behalf of Hibaaq Osman, the CEO of Karama. Please allow me to introduce my colleagues. First, we have Brigitte Chelebian. She's an attorney at law and the executive director and founder of the organization Justice Without Frontiers. She was selected for inclusion on the UN Women EVAW roster and certified to the Justice Rapid Response and UN Women Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Justice Experts roster. She is a member of the Family Committee at the Beirut Bar Association and member of the Steering Committee of the Coalition for the International Criminal Court, and her law firm was recognized as one of the 7 best law firms in Lebanon in social responsibility. We also have Samia al-Hashmi from Sudan, who is a lawyer working on democratic transformation in Sudan. She's a co-founder and the chairwoman of Mutaawinat, an organization that uses law as a strategic tool for positive change for women in Sudan. And it prioritizes women's human rights in the constitution and engagement of women in constitution writing and legal reform. We also have our colleague Suzan Aref from Iraq, who is a human rights and civil society activist, founder and director of the Women Empowerment Organization since 2014. She was the coordinator of the Iraqi Cross-Sector Task Force on 1325 from 2014 to 2019, and she represented Iraq in the UN Security Council twice in a row to working on to presenting the National Action Plan on 1325. We also have our colleague Zahra Langhi from Libya. Zahra Langhi is a highly respected Libyan feminist peace activist researcher, former UN diplomat and scholar. She's the co-founder and CEO of the Libyan Women's Platform for Peace, a socio-political movement focused on gender, peace building and inclusivity. And she is also a very valued member of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum. We also have our colleague Amani Aruri. She's a human rights activist committed to supporting youth, women, and girls in Palestine and in the MENA region. She brings 10 years of experience in advancing gender justice. She's a member of the Generation Equality Global Youth Task Force and a member of the task force of the Generation Equality Compact on Women. She is a member of Karama and a council member of the International Peace Bureau. We will proceed to hear from them before we open the floor to questions. Thank you so much for coming today. We will now give the floor to Brigitte Chelebian from Lebanon.
Thank you, Reem. Is it good?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Reem. Well, I will start by saying that I belong to an Arab region that had always drawn its letter in poetry, literature, science, music, and every struggle story. However, today, the same letters are being drawn with the blood of children and women, of men and elderlies who became victims of armed conflicts. Those victims were unable to find justice that could criminalize perpetrators and put an end to impunity, or to find a local or international community that could secure their protection. They were unable to find a fair Security Council that adopts firm resolution to end impunity of those who have perpetrated the most atrocious and barbaric crimes, or to take resolution to stop selling arms. They rather found a schizophrenic, selective justice manipulated by politics and international interest. I belong as well to a beautiful country, my Lebanon, who had an important role in drafting the International Declaration of Human Rights. But unfortunately, in our days, human rights and human dignity are not respected. I belong to a country who was always proud of its medical services and hospitalization. But in our days, vulnerable, low incomes are not able to access or benefit from services because it becomes very expensive. Cancer patients are dying in silence because of the lack or costly medicine. I belong to a country who graduated famous doctors, engineers, lawyers, inventors, but now all young graduates and professionals are immigrating. As well, now in 2023, almost more than 540,000 children are not able to go to formal schools because of the strike of teachers, whose salaries are not enough to live in dignity, and other children who drop out from school to work and help their families to survive. I belong to a country whose justice system is in danger because of the political interventions in justice sector and because there is no political will to end impunity and prosecute perpetrators. I want to throw the light on the alarming levels of poverty and food security in Lebanon, caused by a decline in economic activities, political instability, and rising the cost of living. The response of the government is failing to ensure everyone's right to an adequate standard of living, including the right to food. The human rights situation is deteriorating further and further. The Lebanese pound has lost 95% of its value since October 2019. More than 80% of the country residents don't have access to the basic rights, including health, education, and an adequate standard of living such as adequate housing and electricity. The World Bank has described Lebanon crisis as a deliberate depression due to Lebanese leaders' mismanagement and lack of effective policy actions, and ranked it among the top 3 more severe global financial crises since the mid-19th century. The economic, social, health, education crisis had a bad effect on women and girls. The percentage of violence and cyberbullying increased starting COVID-19 pandemic to more than 100%. Women and girls are not able to access justice due to the costly legal fees, especially cases related to personal status law, or because of the strike of judges that was run for more than 6 months, or strike of former clerks and employees that also their salaries are not enough for them to live in dignity. The percentage of early marriage is increasing among Lebanese and Syrian refugees, as well as the non-registered children, which could be an indicator of increasing the percentage of abuse, so increasing the percentage of trafficking in women and children. Unfortunately, the government is not taking enough precautions policy to prevent violence and to protect women and girls in Lebanon who are facing different challenges and violations. On the other hand, it is important to mention that despite the whole situation described above, women, human rights activists, NGOs are still fighting to ensure justice at all levels, to provide services and support for women and children, to run strategic campaigns to ensure women participation in decision-making at all levels, to work on revising and updating strategies, including the National Action Plan of 1325. The Lebanese parliament, for example, adopted recently the law to criminalize sexual harassment in workplace. The internal security forces adopted a national hotline to receive calls of women and girls victims of domestic violence. Justice Without Frontiers is working on ensuring access to justice and information and services to women and children victims of violence and who are in conflict with the law. And now, Justice Without Frontiers, with the partnership of Karama and UN Women, is conducting a program focusing on formal and informal justice and how to use the digital platform to provide legal services. Yes, okay. I would like to thank you and to thank your attention and stress of the importance of being all united around justice. Justice is not the responsibility of one individual. It is rather the responsibility of each one of us, because without justice, there is no peace. Without justice, there is no security. And without justice, there is no living with dignity.
We will now go to Suzan Aref from Iraq.
Hello, good morning. From my side, also, I want to talk about women's situation in Iraq and how women still suffering and going backward. So for Iraqi society and Iraqi women particularly, like they have suffered extreme condition and like catastrophe after several of war and economic sanction. And all this affected strongly on women and denied them from to reach services and to reach access their fundamental rights. If now the door is open for women participation and equality, but this cannot be achieved without a clear vision and strategy, legal structure, official machinery, and provision of the implementation. Still, women participation is very limited. It's true that we have the quota. It is not less than 25%. This is for Iraqi parliament, and we have 30% in Kurdistan parliament. We have 97 women in Iraqi parliament, but still with a limit power. So still they are under the mercy of their political parties. And if we come to the executive authority, we can see women participation, it's around 3%. It means there's no faith, belief in women participation. And it means women still, they cannot effect on decisions, on policies. They are not there. And this is the core of the Resolution 1325 about women participation and how they can be part of prevention and also conflict resolution. But if they are still not in the government, they are not part of the decision, so how they can effect. And this is why we can see the consequence. We can see why women rights and women's situation going backward. I want to raise some of the official statistic. There is official statistic from the Superior Judicial Council. It's for the year of 2019 and 2020, 4,000 divorce cases for girls under 15 years. And this is, I'm talking about only the recorded cases, because there is no divorce for unrecorded cases. So this is 4,000 divorce. It is for girls under 15 years. So imagine the year of marriage, 11, 12 years. So this is a catastrophe. It is big alert about what's happening on the ground. Also, the statistics shows that the percentage of marriages under 18 years, it is 25.5. This is all marriages, it happened under 18 years. And 5.2%, this is before 15 years. And also, if we are talking about women in labor market, it shows 10% of women they participating in labor market. About literacy, the number shows 40% of illiterate women in Iraq. In a time before 2003, it was 0. And now it's reaching 40%. So this is all the statistic. It shows the situation, and to prove when I'm saying women's situation is going backward. But still we are talking about women peace security agenda and how to achieve women peace security after 22 years of having this tool and having CEDAW and having SDG. So what's happening on the ground? It is serious. How to rethink again, how to respond to women. It is not that because we have a national action plan, it means we are reaching peace and we are responding to women. The big challenges of this women peace security agenda is still, it is very difficult to translate it on the ground. It is very difficult to understand the policy itself, and it is lack of political will. It is lack of resources allocated to this. So not to convince us, since we have this tool, and it means we are in a good hand. So of course, the women peace security, it is a strong tool, especially for women rights organization. But this strong tool, it needs on continuous base a strong support from international community, UN agencies, how to continue the support for women rights organization. Women rights organization and movement are also working to bridge the gaps between the goal of the Resolution 1325 and the local procedure available on the ground. The reality shows that there is a big gap between our ambitions for our commitment and between the actual political and financial support available for that.
Thank you, Suzan. We will give you another chance later. And now we will go to Samia.
Thank you. Sudan, it has been forgotten for a long time, but Sudanese people managed to accomplish the civil revolution in 2018, where and when by the whole world started to remember and to recognize and to celebrate the revolution, the civic revolution. Although it was faced by brutal violence and killing from the previous regime. Sudanese women were in the front line for the Sudanese revolution, but after the formation of the hybrid government between the military component and civil component, women were deprived for being in the front line of building the nation. And since the revolution, up to October 2001, where the military component took the power and in a strategic, very strategic way. So a coup has been made in 2000, October 2001. And since that time up to now, we are again in continuous resistance to that coup. And the political parties and resistance committees. The resistance committees, this is a new political dynamic in Sudan. The composition of this resistance committee is the youth, the young people who are not affiliated to the political parties, but they are very much engaged in making the revolution. Started to organize themselves. Girls and boys started to organize themselves, and now they are pushing very hard for change. Sudan Bar Association, whom I belong to, beside my role as a women activist or founder for my organization, who's taking care of women in the legal side, we in the Sudan Bar Association managed to draft an interim constitution. This document paved the way for the politician to have like a political agreement. This political agreement now is leading the political process to have full civil government and to take off the military component out of the power. We are doing this with assistance of the UNITAMS. This is a special envoy appointed by the Security Council resolution, and now they are assisting Sudanese people to attain the civil government. You may ask, where are the women? The women, after the revolution, and after they have been deprived from being in the positions of building the nation, I mean in terms of being ruler of the states or ministers, they were very few. And the question of capacity started again to raise, although they are well capacitated. And we know the question of capacity is raised only for women. While men, they are just being politicians, this is enough for them to take over any power. So women managed to do many things. First of all, we managed to have a manifesto of women's demands, women's visions on the political, not only women's rights. It is the issues tackled by the Constitution. What are the visions of women in that document? Also, women work hard to have the NAP, National Action Plan, and it is very comprehensive, and it was participatory
Samia,
for women. Yeah, participatory for women who in the ground, in the war zones, participated heavily in that document. Also, we managed to have a draft of Sudanese Personal Matter Act for Muslims, which we managed to embed some civil rights within that age of marriage and the property rights for women. These kind of issues was not tackled before in our previous laws. We managed to do all these things, but the coup interrupted or cut the way for us to get these laws on ground. What we demand and need from the international community and the UN agencies is to support our process, political process, because we need to address the root causes, not to tackle the symptoms. Thank you.
Now we will listen to Zahra from Libya.
Libyans have just marked 12 years anniversary, the 12th anniversary of the Libyan revolution, and they remain frustrated by a lack of political progress, impatient for change, with the increase of the corruption of the political elite in the country, the kleptocrats, the forces of the status quo that are benefiting from the stalemate in the political process. Political elites, including the governor of the central bank and the board of the central bank in Libya, have long benefited from a culture of impunity. Yet the governor, Sadiq al-Kabir, remains to be protected by political and media establishments and by some international actors who refuse to allow him to be dismissed. With the rise of corruption, the rise of the kleptocrats who have captured the state institutions, we're witnessing dire socio-economic conditions in Libya. For example, those who go to school, they lack even the books for going to school. Lack of sufficient medical infrastructure. Yet, we hear that every day heads of militia, warlords are making billions and billions, whilst Libyans who own all of this wealth are suffering. There's also an attack on civil society activists and specifically women human rights defenders. We are witnessing cyber war on women. There's an increase of conflict-related sexual violence, all of this with zero accountability. The political process remains protracted and falls off the aspirations of Libyans who want to select and elect their representatives. So we remain impatient and knowing that those who are in power, the forces of status quo, though they appear enemies, but they agree on one thing, on maintaining the status quo. Nevertheless, it is unsustainable. So, unfortunately, one of the forces of the status quo is the government that has been appointed by a UN-led peace process that was a rigged peace process. And I testify for that, for I have participated in that process. The head of the government has been following populist rentier economic policies to buy political popularity ahead of the elections, backed by the central bank governor, in complete contravention of the recommendations of the economic track, with zero accountability or oversight. All of this, I might add, since we're talking about women, peace and security, we have a UN appointed government of national unity that has criminalized the agenda of women, peace and security, that has actually put the Women's Affairs Minister under investigation for signing an MOU with UN to develop a WPS NAP. We haven't heard anything from the UN mission, though in their mandate, it's the implementation of women, peace and security. And that tells us that there should be lessons learned, and we're thinking of a new political process. We need to include explicitly in that document a reference to the implementation of women, peace and security. As we are facing and witnessing a stalemate in the political track, a political division, two governments, a capture of states institutions, undermining the roadmap, defrauding Libyans of their right to elect their representatives, we need a breakthrough. And I think that breakthrough came with the proposal of the SRSG that was proposed at the end of February. The plan that he has briefed the Security Council on is goal-oriented. It puts the election and the idea of having a high-level steering panel is that no longer these political elite who have defrauded Libyans of the right to elect freely their representatives, whether the executive or the legislative power, they are no longer and should be no longer in the steering committee. So he has proposed a panel composed of 30, 40 Libyans, inclusive, and as we know always in political dialogues and peace processes, the question of representation is essential. And could, if there is no inclusive representation and fair representation and legitimate and transparent, meaning that we need to learn from our lessons from the previous peace processes, political dialogues that we had, we need to have a vetting process of those candidates in this process. So inclusive vetting process, so not to bring corrupt people. That's an important lesson from the last Libyan political dialogue forum. The other question is the agenda.
You have 1 minute.
Yes, what will be discussed by this steering committee. One of the things is a mechanism of oversight of the economic mechanism of the management of wealth in Libya, and that's important. That's the breakthrough that we need. The other thing is we cannot accept that this government, the incompetent, corrupt government, be a grantor institution for the elections. We don't need another government, but we need a small executive. The last thing is the question of how are we going to make sure that there will be no corruption in the coming political process? What preventive measures will UNSMIL take to make sure that there will be no political bribery, there will be no buying of votes, to make sure that this process would not be undermined as the previous process, and to make sure and to ensure that we have presidential and parliamentary elections at the end of the day, and respecting the aspirations of almost 3 million Libyans who registered last year to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go to Amani from Palestine.
Thank you, Reem, and thank you to all of my colleagues, inspirational colleagues whom we learn from. As everyone is talking about the innovation and technological change, which is the main, the priority theme of this CSW, we as Palestinians, we are still seeking our right to life, our right to move freely from a place to a place, our right to have access to basic services, our right to feel and live the safety and security that the international community is speaking about. As we are speaking about women, peace and security, Palestine is not different than most of the Arab countries in terms of discrimination, in terms of shrinking spaces, in terms of lack of democratic processes in Palestine. The democratic process is ineffective. We don't have elections, whether presidential elections or the Palestinian Legislative Council, which is like the parliament. Patriarchal structures, discriminatory laws and regulations that like prevent women from their basic rights, from access to justice, from the protection they need also, not only as peace builders, but also as human beings. Women, victims of violence, they cannot have the protection they need. In Palestine, women, after all of this, with all of these challenges that the Palestinian women and girls suffer, like other Arab countries, on top of all of these challenges comes the Israeli occupation. The Israeli prolonged occupation, more than 65 years, Palestinians have been suffering from daily restrictions, daily violations of their human rights, daily oppression also. In the Palestinian society and digital space also, Palestinian women and girls continue to experience various kinds of violence, and this is exacerbated with the digital revolution, with more access also provided to girls and women. Although at the same time, although women and girls, and not all women and girls have the same accessibility to these services. Not all women and girls have even, they do not even have these digital devices to talk about their access to technology. Women and girls are facing increasing and disproportionate impact of the worsening humanitarian and security situation, which is resulting in increase of civilian casualties and protection risks, deprivation of freedom of movement, and forced displacement. Data shows that gender-based violence is one of the main risks exacerbated by the Israeli occupation, as the soldiers, the security forces, and even settlers are using these patriarchy and discrimination policies against Palestinians, especially women and girls. Of course, they are using these structures to exacerbate the impact of their policies and systematic violations against Palestinians. These the human rights violations inflicted on women and girls by Israeli occupation include property destruction, demolition, and lack of quality houses. Right now, tens, if not hundreds, of demolition orders are being distributed among the West Bank, distributed to families, asking them to demolish their own houses in their own hands, just to avoid paying the fees, the destruction fees. Aggression and targeting civilians, and I'm sure most of you have heard about Shireen Abu Akleh and other journalists and human rights defenders, women and girls who were targeted by Israeli forces, shot and killed while doing their work, while defending human rights, were covering invasions on refugee camps, killing Palestinians. In mid-February, more than 11 Palestinians were killed in the same day, including women and girls, and more than 120 Palestinians were injured during an invasion on Jenin refugee camp. Currently, women and girls cannot even, while we are speaking now, women and girls in Hawara, village of Nablus, cannot even step out to their balcony, not even going on the street, because if they step out, they might be shot. They might be shot or targeted with gas bomb or with a stone by Israeli settlers, who are protected by Israeli soldiers while attacking Palestinians. So the safety, the security and peace we are talking about is lacked in Palestine. Women and girls do not enjoy the safety even to practice their peace-building activities, to advocate for the peace and security agendas. Expansion of settlements and settlers' violence. Now our major concern is about our movement from a place to a place, from home to school or to work, because of our fear from the settlers' attacks. And now Palestinians cannot even use their own lands for agriculture or for building or for any reason, because they can be attacked any time by settlers who take over this land without any right. The forcible transfer of Palestinians of East
You have 1
Jerusalem
minute.
and in Area C also is another concern, leaving women and girls homeless without even having a shelter. Our main demand from the international community is to put an end to these violations of human rights, and to also to oblige Israel to respect the international law, the human rights law and the humanitarian law, because Palestinians' lives matter. We need to end this impunity on perpetrators and to set an accountability mechanism to put an end to these systematic measures of violations, systematic measures of depriving Palestinian women and girls of their rights as human beings, as mothers, as activists, as human rights defenders, as change makers in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was very inspirational. You're doing a lot of great work, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We have some time to take questions.
Hi, my name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. I know my colleagues will ask about Lebanon and Palestine and Sudan, so I will stick to two countries, Iraq and Libya, very quickly. On Iraq, you know, the SG was recently there, Mr. Guterres, and you talked about a lot of challenges, and this year we mark 20 years for the American and British illegal invasion. Do you believe that the message he and what he talked about was enough, or in the sense of the challenges that the Iraqi people, with their corruption, with the role that the international community is playing? What would you say is the main challenge for Iraqi women in today? And on Libya, you talked about the initiative of Mr. Batili. How do you think he can, which steps he needs to take in order not to fail into the same problems and mistakes that were done there? And do you think that elections could be reached this year in Libya? Thank you.
Thank you. If you can just repeat your name again.
Ibtisam Azim, Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper.
Okay, so we're just going to take two more questions, so to also give you like 2 minutes to think about it. Please go ahead.
Me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Abdul Hamid Siam. I am the correspondent of Al Quds Al Arabi at the UN. I have a question in general for anyone who wants to take the answer, and one question for the representative of Sudan. I start with Sudan. Mr. Burhan lately is reaching out to Israel for normalization. Does that resonate with the civil society? Does he receive any support from the Sudanese people for normalization with Israel? And my question in general, men in the Arab world are also oppressed. And normally, according to theories of Gramsci and Frantz Fanon, those who are oppressed normally adopt the means and rules of the oppressor. So don't you see that also men in the Arab world need to be also liberated from this mentality of, because they are oppressed, they go and oppress their women? Thank you.
Great. We can take another question. Any other questions? Okay, we can give you a chance to answer the questions quickly, and then we can take another round. Okay, who wants to start? Zahra, do you want to start? Yeah, sure. Zahra, Suzan, and then Samia.
So, for the question of the possibility of holding elections this year, I think it is vital to hold it this year. It's actually overdue. And last year we were in debates and people were saying, what will happen? We will have a political division if we had elections and people do not accept the results of the elections we have political division. and corrupt kleptocrats in power, dire humanitarian conditions. So definitely we have regional actors that make use of the transactional government of GNU and other political actors. So we need legitimate political actors, and that only comes through direct elections. So definitely it's not a panacea, but it is the basic step towards stabilization to address the question of political legitimacy, and as soon as possible. As for the plan of Mr. Batile, as I was saying, for the question of representation in choosing and this is a very tricky question, how is he going to choose and on what criteria and what measures would there be a vetting process for the members of the high-level steering committee? And the other thing is, because the steering committee, he said it will be composed of the 5+5 military track with tribal leaders, political leaders, youth and women leaders. It looks comprehensive, inclusive. It doesn't look coherent. So I would understand, my understanding is that there will be technical committees appointed for putting the legal framework. So you need to go to legal or political experts with a human rights background to put the electoral laws, to put the legal framework, the constitutional basis, because they said they will be working on the already the amendment, the 13th amendment of the Constitutional Declaration. The other thing, the most important thing, I think, choosing a small executive, and we don't need to call it a government, that will oversee the elections is important. The other thing, he already mentioned the economic mechanism, but there are no details for monitoring the use. We need to make sure that presidential candidates have equal opportunity and that no one is using state revenues for their own electoral campaign. That's very important. The last thing is preventive measures to make sure there will be no corruption, no bribes. I think that's very important. And that could be related to a TOR for the steering committee. We did not have a TOR, a legal framework that could have made the LPDF more resilient in the struggles and the challenges that it witness. So there are gaps that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Let's hear from Suzan.
Sudan?
Suzan.
Okay, Susan. Yeah, I will respond to Ms. Ibtisam about her question. Yes, we know that Mr. Guterres, he was in Iraq. But again, I have to say that it was not the main agenda for her visit to look after women's situation in Iraq. Maybe this took a very little part of his agenda, only to have a short meeting with a few women. They were talking about women participation. And again, it need a serious attention. It need a mission on lower level to come to Iraq, to investigate on all what's happening to women in Iraq and to understand the context, because it is not enough to say, yes, we have the National Action Plan and we have a strategy for women, but how to prove the implementation, how to prove the kind of structure and machinery available for implementation, to have some indicator
But it is not enough to say that we have 97 women in parliament, but what they are doing exactly in parliament. Like women, they felt the 97 women in Iraqi parliament, they failed to pass the combating domestic violence law for 5 years, and now they stopped to look at the law itself. And we know we have the GBV increasingly, and especially the sexual violence. And I raised the statistic about the child marriage. So this is all happening, and they were not able just to pass this law. They were against that law. So this is how, when we are talking about women participation, this is enough just to see women, they are there. So this is why it's still, there's no political will, lack of political will on this. So how to guarantee to have this political will on a higher level? We know for UN agencies, their main partner is government. Sometimes they're adapting to what they need, but and not to what they are there, to convince them, to push for that. So this is all a serious thing to talk about it. The question, why with all the efforts, all the budgets that's spending in Iraq on women issues, but still women's situation is going backward. It is a big question mark. So this is need
Suzan.
re-strategize the work on women issue.
Thank you. Samia, we'll give you 2 minutes to respond to the question. Yeah.
Mike. Samia.
Okay. I think the visit of Burhan to Israel is not something because he wanted to build a relationship with Israel. He wanted to escape from his responsibilities and to split the views and to distract the people from what is he's doing right now. So we are not looking at it as a legitimate visit because he himself is not in power. He is the head of the coup. So making relationship with Israel is something has to be determined by the people, not by the individuals.
Yeah, sure. You have 1 minute. Yeah.
Very quick. Regarding the question of oppression of men as well, this is 100% true. Everyone is affected by conflict. Everyone is affected by occupation, by even crisis, but it's a disproportionate impact. And it is more, women and girls are more impacted by these violations of human rights, by violence. But specifically speaking on violence, violence is a cycle. And if we do not address the root causes of the violence, it will keep reproducing itself. So everyone should be held accountable for their responsibilities, for their behaviors. And we cannot deny, not only in Palestine, but in the Arab region, we cannot deny the dramatically increasing rates of violence, domestic violence against women. In Palestine only, in 2021, 2022, number of femicide cases were more than 57 cases. And maybe in the other countries, maybe it exceeds this number, but we do have a denial by our governments, by the our officials. When they speak about violence, they do deny these numbers. They do deny the lack of protection provided for women. But at the same time, women should not be punished that men are living the oppression, because they are already living the discrimination. They are already bearing the lion's share of responsibilities, taking care of the houses, and with the increased poverty, they have to work outside as well, not as not as part of their choice, but as it's necessity driven. It's because they have to work. So everyone should also appreciate this, and all members of the societies and families should take their own responsibilities to protect women and girls.
Okay, we have time to take. Okay, we'll take your questions. You can start.
Thank you so much. My name is Ifram Kusaifi from Arab News Daily. I have a question for Amani and another one for Ms. Brigitte. Could you speak, please, to the role of the international community and especially Western governments who often in various world fora used or champion the issue of women in the Arab world? On the ground, what is their actual contribution? How much do you feel their support in the struggle that you wage on a daily basis? And Ms. Brigitte, everyone is living a horrific life in Lebanon right now, but hearing you talk about Lebanese women, one can also not help wonder about the women who already had been marginalized and had been having a dire life before the crisis. I'm talking about women, Syrian refugees, Palestinian refugees, domestic workers from all over the world, Africa, Asia. Do you take those women also under the same umbrella in the struggle also that you wage? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take your question quickly, and we can't take any more questions, sorry, because of the time. Very quickly.
I'll be quick. I'm Alana Despain from the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. My question is for really anyone who wants to answer. Something that Suzan mentioned in her intervention was that just because you have a NAP, it doesn't mean that women are achieving peace or safety or security. So my question is for all of your countries, I think everyone but Libya has a NAP on WPS. What do you see as the next step for actually achieving the realities that are hoped for in this document, rather than just having it be ink on paper that's not really making a difference?
Thank you. We have 3 minutes, so Amani, let's start with you, and then we'll go to 1 minute,
Okay.
and then Brigitte 1 minute, and then we'll give
can
Suzanne 1
calculate
minute.
it.
Okay.
Okay, I think the international community has an imperative role to promote the implementation, to promote the gender equality agenda, and to promote the application of the international treaties and conventions that Palestine has already acceded, including the CEDAW Convention, which is still facing a huge a huge resistance from the conservative groups, conservative movements. But I think the international community has the biggest role in holding accountability of duty bearers and to hold the state for its responsibility, including demanding the passage of family protection bill, demanding the legal reforms, and demanding the women's participation in democratic and political processes. And this was very clear during the campaign when we had the talks about elections that were supposed to happen but didn't. So the main issue is with the political will. I think the international community is doing its role, but not enough, of course, because they have to deal with different struggles. The struggle with the occupation, the struggle with the Palestinian authorities, the struggle with the anti-feminist movements. But still, it is a necessary role, but it should be combined with the accountability measures. Without an accountability measures, the violence will still increasing. There will be no political will to pass a new laws to protect women. There will not be legal reforms that also promote women's rights. So we need to have effective measures. Speaking to diplomats, speaking to officials is not enough. We need to have actions.
Thank you. Brigitte, just 1 minute, and then Suzanne 1 minute.
Okay. You are totally right. But when I was talking about women, I was meaning all women living in Lebanon, Lebanese, Syrian, Palestinian, and all women were they had a problem in the current situation. But I have to also highlight one issue, that in the current situation in Lebanon, we have kind of a conflict between the Syrian refugees and the host community, because part part of the Syrian refugees, they are receiving financial support from UN agency, medical support. So, and on the other hand, the Lebanese community are not receiving this community, so this support. So this is creating kind of a conflict. This is on one hand. On the other hand, there is a lot of program in Lebanon targeting not only Lebanese, Syrian, and Palestinian. And I want to say that the issue become very stressful because some of the program, they are not touching really the basic needs of the targeted group. So from here, also maybe I want to also reply to your first question. It is very important for the international community to draft a program to localize their programs and their activities, and to make sure that any program is touching the basic needs of women, of girls, of children. And when we talk about women, we have to talk about not only women, we have to think about girls because their needs are different. And on another hand, one thing, on the other hand, there is also a lack of knowledge that all refugees living on the Lebanese territory, they are benefiting from the same laws and protection process as the Lebanese women. So there is long.
Thank you, Brigitte. We have to go to Suzan in 1 minute.
Okay. Yeah, to respond to your question, what we need exactly to be able to implement the Women Peace Security Agenda, we need accountable mechanism for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is really important, and also the political and financial will. We need a legal structure, we need official machinery, we need coordination among all the actors working on Women Peace Security Agenda and civil society, women rights organization. They have to be part of the structure of developing, of implementation, of monitoring and evaluation. So this is all what we need to make sure to have a concrete action on the implementation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We don't have time because it's 12:02. Thank you everyone. Okay, we have to finish now. Thank you so much for coming, and thanks to the speakers for doing such a good job. Yeah, thank you so much.